Night my father stood up at my graduation dinner and raised his glass to my brother. I finally understood something it had taken me 25 years to learn. You can be invisible in a room full of people who share your blood. You can sit 4 feet from your own mother and disappear completely. It was a Thursday, May 16th, 2019. We were at an Olive Garden off Far Hills Avenue in Kettering, Ohio, because my mother said the private room was nice enough for the occasion. The occasion was supposed to be me. I'd just finished my associate's degree in baking and pastry arts at Sinclair, the local community college. 2 years of 5 a.m. lab classes, 3 of those years working the register at a gas station to pay for it, and a final practical exam where I built a 3-tier almond genoise that my instructor photographed for the program brochure. I had it on my phone. I kept looking at it under the table. My father tapped his fork against his water glass at 7:40. The room went quiet. He smiled the way he smiled in church. Broad and rehearsed, and he said he wanted to thank everyone for coming on such a special night. Then he turned, not to me, but to my older brother, sitting at the head of the table in a navy blazer. "Some of you may not have heard yet," my father said, "but our son just got into Wharton, full ride, the MBA program at Penn, top 3 in the country." The table erupted. My aunt actually stood. My brother went red and looked down at his bread plate, the way he always did when they did this, because even he knew. My father let the applause run, then lifted his glass higher and added, almost as a footnote, "And our daughter finished her little cooking program today, too." A few people laughed. I counted them later, the way you count things when your brain refuses to feel them in the moment. 9. 9 people laughed at little cooking program. My mother smiled and nodded like he'd said something tender. I didn't make a scene. I didn't push my chair back. I just memorized the room. The fake grapevines on the wall, the breadstick crumbs on the white cloth, the exact angle of my father's wrist as he toasted a degree my brother hadn't even started yet, on a night that was supposed to have my name on it. I left before dessert. Nobody noticed. My brother texted me at 9:14, "Hey, I'm sorry. That was messed up. Call me," and I didn't answer. I drove home, sat in my Civic in the driveway with the engine ticking, and made a decision that felt, at the time, like grief. I was done auditioning for people who'd already cast someone else in my part. What I didn't know yet was that 6 years later, my father would call my brother in a panic, begging him to find me. And what my brother would uncover would make my parents realize they'd made a mistake they could never undo. But by then, I was already gone, in every way that mattered. Let me back up, because the graduation wasn't the wound. It was just the scar tissue over a wound that started a long time before. I was born in 1994, 3 years after my brother, in a brick split level in Kettering, where the value of a child was measured by what you could brag about at the Kroger checkout. My brother was the kind of kid adults called sharp. Straight A's without trying. My parents framed his report cards, actually framed them in the hallway by the bathroom, so every guest had to walk past them. The first time I understood the rules, I was 7. I'd won the 2nd grade reading marathon, more books than any kid in my class, and the prize was a paper crown and a certificate with a gold sticker. I ran in from the bus and held it up to my mother at the kitchen counter. She was on the phone. She glanced at it, said, "That's nice, honey," and went right back to telling my aunt that my brother had tested into the gifted track. That night, the certificate ended up in the recycling bin under a Honey Nut Cheerios box. I found it when I went to throw away my cereal bowl. The gold sticker was still shiny. I learned something standing over that bin in my pajamas. Trying hard didn't matter if you were the kid they hadn't decided to be proud of. There were 100 small ones after that. The travel soccer team my brother got driven to 3 counties for, while I quit dance after 1 recital because nobody could find time to take me. The science fair in 6th grade where I built a working model of a water filtration system, sand and gravel and activated charcoal in a stack of 2-liter bottles and placed 3rd at the district level. My parents didn't come. They had my brother's varsity banquet the same night. I rode my bike home in the dark, with the trophy in my backpack and ate dinner alone, a bowl of cereal again, while their voices carried up from the basement where they were watching his game tape. The car was the one that really set the shape of things. My brother turned 18 in the spring of 2009, and my parents bought him a silver Honda Accord, used but barely, $12,000 they'd been quietly saving. There was a little ceremony in the driveway. My father gave a speech about earning your way. When I turned 16 2 years later and asked carefully if I might use the old Camry sometimes, my mother said I could when it wasn't needed. It was a 2001 with a check engine light that never went off and a passenger door that only opened from the outside. It was almost never available. So I walked 2 miles to my shift at the gas station on Wilmington Pike 3 nights a week, and I put every paycheck in a coffee can taped behind the dryer in the laundry room, and I stopped asking my parents for anything at all. That part, the not asking, turned out to be the most useful thing they ever taught me. By the time I was applying to programs, my brother was getting consultants for his grad school essays. My parents paid $1,800 to a man in a strip mall who polished his personal statement. When I told them I'd gotten into the culinary program at Sinclair, my mother said it was very practical, sweetie, since you were never really a student. They contributed nothing. I took out a federal loan, $11,000, and worked through both years. My brother graduated undergrad with no debt and a fellowship. I graduated with a certificate, a knife roll I bought myself, and $41,000 in loans counting interest. I'd gotten good at being unseen. I just didn't know yet that being unseen could be a thing you used on purpose. The night of the Olive Garden dinner, I went home to the basement room I was renting from a woman off Dorothy Lane, $400 a month, and I opened my laptop and started a new email account under a name that wasn't quite mine. I sat on the floor with my back against the bed frame and I started searching how to sell baked goods online. Cottage food law. Ohio, how to build a brand without showing your face. I opened a spreadsheet and I counted what I had. $3,200 in the coffee can plus a final paycheck. Rent, ingredients, packaging, a domain name. I figured I had about 4 months before I'd have to go crawling back to the gas station. My brother texted again at 11:40. Please talk to me. I turned the phone face down. I didn't cry. I'd done all my crying years ago over a recycling bin. What I did instead was math, because the math was the only thing in my life nobody could take a toast away from. On June 9th, 2019, I loaded everything I owned into the Civic and drove to Austin, Texas. 20 hours, one way. I'd picked it off a list of cities with good cottage food laws and a real food scene, and because it was far enough that nobody could say I'd run home, I found a garage apartment in the Cherrywood neighborhood off Craigslist, $750 a month. A single room with a window unit and a kitchen so small I could touch both walls. The landlord, an old man who grew tomatoes in coffee cans, didn't ask me a single question about my family. I cried in the good way that first night, the relieved way, because for the first time in my life, no one in the building knew I was the disappointing one. I started with granola. It's the unglamorous truth. I baked it in a borrowed convection oven, this maple tahini recipe I've been tinkering with for years, and I bagged it by hand and sold it at a Saturday farmer's market on the east side, a folding table and a hand-lettered sign. I named the brand after my grandmother. She was the only person in my family who'd ever looked at me like I was a whole person and not a comparison. Her maiden name was Birch, so I called it Birch and Honey. And on every label, I signed it, with initials that weren't obviously mine. The persona did the talking. The founder was M. Ellery, reclusive, never photographed. I told myself it was for branding. The truth was, I never again wanted my name attached to something just so it could be measured against someone else's. The first month I cleared $400 in profit. By Thanksgiving, I had a little following and a website. I taught myself everything off YouTube at 2 in the morning. Food photography, shipping logistics, how to file for an LLC. By the spring of 2020, when the world shut down and everyone was suddenly home and online and desperate for something to bake, I was ready in a way I hadn't planned to be. I added baking kits, sourdough starters with a printed card in my own handwriting. The orders went from 40 a week to 400. I hired a part-time packer, a college kid named off the notice board at the coffee shop. By the end of 2020, I'd done $110,000 in revenue alone out of a garage apartment, and I told no one in my family a single word about any of it. My brother had called 11 times that year and I'd answered twice, both times for under a minute. "I'm fine. I'm busy. I'll call you back." I never called back. My mother texted on holidays, the same flat line every time. "Thinking of you. Let us know if you need anything." They never once asked what city I was in. Then came February 18th, 2021, 8:50 at night. My phone rang with a date and number I didn't have saved, and something in my chest already knew. I answered. "Marin, thank God." My father's voice cracking, breathless. I heard my mother somewhere behind him crying. "It's your mom. She collapsed at the house. They're saying it's her heart, a valve. She's at Miami Valley. They've got her prepped for emergency surgery right now, and the insurance is fighting us on the coverage. We need $22,000 by morning or they won't proceed. I can't reach your brother. He's overseas. You're the only one." "Can I talk to her?" I said. "Let me just." "She's sedated, honey. She's already back there. There's no time, please." His voice broke completely. "I have never asked you for anything. She's your mother." I looked at my bank balance on the laptop screen. $26,000? Everything I'd built, every late night, every bag of granola, my entire safety net. And here is the thing I have replayed 1,000 times. The thing the people who judge me have never had screamed into their ear at 9 at night. When someone tells you your mother is dying behind a door you can't open, the part of your brain that does math goes quiet. I'd spent my whole life being told I was the cold one, the selfish one, the one who didn't care about family. And some sick, hopeful part of me thought, if I do this, they'll finally see I was never any of those things. I wired the money the next morning, $22,000 to an account in my father's name. I had $4,000 left. 3 days later, I texted to ask how the surgery went. The message turned green. I called my father, straight to voicemail. I called my mother, voicemail. I tried again that night and the next morning, and by the third day, I understood the shape of what had happened with a clarity that felt like cold water. They had blocked me, every one of them. They took the money and erased me like I was a line item they'd finished using. I didn't fall apart. I sat on the floor of that garage apartment for a long time, and then I got up and made a folder on my laptop and labeled it, dryly, receipts. I saved the wire confirmation. I screenshotted every green message. I saved my father's voicemail greeting before they could change the number. I had no plan for it. I just had a bone-deep certainty, the kind you only get from being underestimated your whole life, that I would need it someday. Then I went back to work, because work was the one thing that had never lied to me. I'll move fast through the next part, because the months blur and the arc matters more than the days. I changed my phone number and didn't give it to anyone in my family. I moved out of the garage apartment into a real one-bedroom near Muller, then later, when I could afford it, a small house in the Hyde Park neighborhood, with a real kitchen and a backyard where I put in raised beds. I poured everything back into the business. In 2021, I cleared $260,000. I incorporated properly Birch and Honey Provisions LLC, registered in Texas, the founder still M. Ellery on paper, my real name buried in the filings where only a lawyer would ever look. I hired a real operations manager, then a food scientist part-time, then a small team. We moved into a commercial kitchen in 2022. We landed a contract with a regional grocery chain, then a national one. By the end of 2023, the brand was on shelves in 400 stores, and I had 19 employees and a $4 million year, and not one person who'd watched my father call it a little cooking program had any idea. I still never showed my face. Investors thought it was a marketing gimmick. My team thought I was just shy. The truth was simpler and sadder than that. M. Ellery had a reputation built on what she made. The girl from Kettering had a reputation built on what she'd failed to be. I knew which one I wanted my work attached to. By the summer of 2025, Birch and Honey was doing real numbers, and the offers started. In July, my attorney called me, a woman I'd hired 2 years before, the first person I ever fully trusted with the whole picture. A national food conglomerate wanted to acquire a majority stake. Their opening number made me sit down on my own kitchen floor, $9.5 million, with $6 million in cash up front and the rest as an earnout, and I'd keep a third of the company and stay on to run the brand. Due diligence would start immediately. It would be handled, she said, by an outside accounting firm in Chicago, one of the big regional ones, to vet every filing and contract. I said yes on July 22nd. I had no idea that the firm doing the vetting had a forensic accounting partner whose name I'd been refusing to think about for 6 years. My brother. He found me the way you find a ghost. He was reviewing the incorporation documents and the cap table, and there, in the registered records, was my legal name attached to the founder line and a home address in Austin. He told me later he stared at it for a full minute thinking it was a coincidence, and then he cross-referenced the brand's Ellery with everything he knew, with our grandmother's maiden name, and the floor dropped out from under him. He called the cell number listed on the LLC. It was a business line that rang to my operations manager, who, per my standing instructions, took a message. The message said, "This is her brother. Please, I just need to know she's okay." I almost deleted it. Instead, I called him back at 7 that night, and the first thing he said before hello was, "You built this. You built all of this, and you never told any of us." His voice was wrecked. "The last time I trusted this family with money," I said, "I lost everything I had. So no, I didn't tell you." There was a long silence. "What money?" And that's when I realized he didn't know any of it. I told him. The call in February 2021, Mom's heart. The emergency surgery, the $22,000. The block, 3 days later. I listened to my brother stop breathing on the other end of the line. "Marin," he said slowly, "Mom never had heart surgery. She's fine. She's been fine." In February 2021, she was with me. I flew her out to Denver for a long weekend that month. I have the photos. There was no surgery. There was no collapse. He paused and his voice changed, went flat and cold in a way I'd never heard from him. "And they told us, they've been telling all of us for years, that you cut everyone off after graduation, that you stopped answering, that you abandoned us." I gripped the edge of my counter. He used her name. He told me she was dying to get the money, and she didn't even know. "She didn't know," my brother said. "I'd swear it on my life. She thinks you went no contact." I want to be clear about something here, because the people who'd picked this story apart would ask why I needed any proof, why anyone needs records to know a thing like this. I didn't need them to know. I knew. My brother knew. We're not idiots. We needed them because knowing a thing in your gut and being able to prove it to a lawyer are two different countries, and I had spent 6 years quietly becoming a person who understood the difference. So when my brother said he wanted to get our mother's actual medical records, it wasn't to find out the truth, it was to nail it to the wall where my father couldn't peel it off. It took a few weeks. My mother, once she got on a real phone call with my brother and heard a fraction of it, signed the release herself, her hands shaking, he said, the whole time. The records came back from Miami Valley and from her actual cardiologist, covering all of 2021. No surgery. No emergency, no valve, no collapse. One routine physical in April, blood pressure slightly high, told to cut back on salt. That was it. My brother forwarded me the PDF on August 30th and added one line. "There's nothing here. He invented a dying woman to rob you. I'm sick." I didn't reply right away. I just dragged the file into the folder labeled receipts, and I felt the last warm, hopeful, stupid little ember in me. The one that had wired $22,000 because maybe this time they'd see me finally go cold. My brother didn't stop there. He's a forensic accountant. Digging is the literal job. Over September, he pulled what he could from public records, mortgage filings in Montgomery County, a few careful conversations with relatives under the cover of just catching up. What he found explained everything. Our father had a gambling problem that had metastasized over a decade. The riverboat casinos in Indiana, online sports books, the kind of debt that compounds in the dark. They'd refinanced the house 3 separate times. The original mortgage in 2004 had been $140,000. It was now $198 on a house worth maybe $170. They were underwater. There was 30-some thousand in credit card debt, and as best as my brother could piece it together, close to $60,000 owed to people you don't want to owe money to. My $22,000 had been a single bucket bailed out of a sinking boat. It hadn't even kept them afloat a year. "That's not my problem," I told my brother when he laid it all out on a call in mid-September, and I meant it, but I also knew, the way you know weather, that it wasn't over. Drowning people don't stop grabbing for things to pull under with them. Sure enough, in early October, my mother, who by then had pieced together enough of the truth to be horrified, but not enough to be brave, started calling me. My brother had, against my advice, given her my number because he still believed something I'd stopped believing. The first calls were apologies. Real ones. My mother sobbing that she didn't know, that she'd been lied to, that she'd had no idea about the surgery story. I believed her, actually. I think she genuinely didn't know. But then, within 2 weeks, the calls changed. Because my father had found out the walls were closing in, and my father, when cornered, does the only thing he's ever done. He turns the people who love him into shields. My mother started calling to tell me your father is not well, he has a sickness, this gambling is a disease. If you go after him for the money, it will destroy us, it will destroy your mother. Do you want that on your conscience? The con had simply changed costumes. First I was supposed to pay to save her life. Now I was supposed to stay quiet to save his. On October 28th, my father himself called from a new number. I let it go to voicemail and listened later. His voice was different than the desperate crack of 2021. It was hard. "I hear you've got money now. We're family. Family helps family. Your mother and I are in a real situation and you have an obligation whether you like it or not. We'll be in touch." That was the word he used. Obligation. He'd robbed me with a fairy tale about a dying woman, blocked me for 6 years, and now he was calling my success an obligation I owed him. I forwarded the voicemail to my attorney that same night. Here's where I think a lot of people would have wanted me to go scorched earth, and believe me, I had the resources to. But I'd learned something building a company from a coffee can. You don't win by being loud. You win by being right and being documented and being patient. My attorney drafted a 30-page letter laying out everything, the wire fraud, the false pretenses, the identity misuse of my mother's medical situation, the recorded extortion attempt, and we sent a formal cease and desist with a clear choice attached. They had 72 hours to confirm in writing that they would never contact me again, withdraw any claim of obligation, and acknowledge the debt. If they didn't, I would file a fraud complaint with the county prosecutor and a civil suit, and the gambling debts and the refinancing, and all of it would become a matter of public record. But before the letter went out, I wanted to look my father in the eye once, not to negotiate, to close the door myself instead of slamming it through a lawyer. We met on November 13th, 2025 at a Panera on Wilmington Pike, 2 miles from the gas station I used to walk to. I picked it on purpose. My brother came. He insisted. My parents arrived 11 minutes late, which I knew was on purpose too, a little power move. The same way my father had always made his entrances. My mother's eyes were swollen. My father's hands shook around his coffee, though I couldn't tell anymore if that was nerves or just the years. My mother started. "Moran, sweetheart, we've been worried sick about you for so long." I put my phone on the table, face up, the rev recording dot visible. "I'm going to say this once," I said, and my voice came out steadier than I'd expected. "In February of 2021, you called me and told me Mom was dying. You told me she was in emergency heart surgery and you needed $22,000 by morning. I sent it. 3 days later, you blocked me. Mom was never sick. Mom never had surgery. Mom didn't even know you did it. I slid the medical records across the table, then the wire receipt, then a printed transcript of the extortion voicemail. You didn't borrow from me. You stole from me, using a lie about your own wife. And last month you tried to do it again. My father's face went from flush to gray. He reached for the old script anyway. Families help each other. We were in trouble. That money, we always meant to. You invented a dying woman, I said quietly. There's no version of that you can call borrowing. My mother grabbed for the papers, her hands trembling as she flipped through her own records, the records that proved she'd never been on a table. And then she did the thing that ended whatever was left between us. She looked up at me, tears running, and she said, "He's sick, Marin. He has a disease. If you do this to him, it'll kill us both. Are you really going to send your own father to jail?" Not, "I'm sorry he used my name." Not, "I can't believe what he did to you." Just protect him. Even now, even holding the proof in her own hands. My brother spoke before I could. He'd been silent the whole time, and when he finally talked, his voice was very calm and very final. "He didn't just do it to her," he said to our mother. "He did it to you. He told the whole family she abandoned us so none of us would ask questions. He's been lying to you for 6 years to cover his own debts, and you're still defending him." "You're choosing her," my father said to him, the old reflex, the dividing of his children into sides. "There aren't sides," my brother said. "There's just what you did." I stood up. "Here's what happens now," I said. "You'll get a letter Monday. You have 72 hours to sign it and confirm in writing that you will never contact me again and that there's no debt and no obligation between us. If you sign it, I walk away and you never hear from me. If you don't, I file with the prosecutor on Thursday and everything in these folders becomes public." I picked up my phone. "I'm not doing this to destroy you. You did that yourselves a long time ago. I'm just making sure you can never do it to me again." I walked out. My brother walked out with me. Behind us, I heard my mother start to cry in earnest, and for the first time in my life, that sound didn't reach in and pull on anything. We got into his rental car in the Panera parking lot, and neither of us said a word for a couple of minutes, and then he reached over and squeezed my hand hard and said, "That was the hardest thing I've ever watched anyone do." "Me too," I said. And then, to my own surprise, I laughed and so did he, this watery, exhausted laugh. Two grown adults in a Panera parking lot finally on the same side of something. They signed the letter? Of course they did. The threat of it all coming into daylight was the one thing my father couldn't gamble on. My attorney forwarded me their lawyer's confirmation on November 19th. My clients agreed to cease all contact and withdraw any claims. I read it 3 times. Then I closed my laptop and I cried for the first time in 6 years. And they weren't sad tears. They were the kind you cry when you finally put down something you've been carrying so long you forgot it was heavy. The acquisition closed on December 2nd, 2025. $6 million in cash hit my business account. And I sat there looking at a number with that many digits in it. A number that belonged to the girl who walked 2 miles to a gas station and saved her paychecks in a coffee can taped behind a dryer. And I didn't feel triumphant. I felt quiet. I went out to dinner by myself that night, ordered the most expensive thing on the menu, and tipped the server 40%, and walked home in the December chill smiling at nothing. A week later, I flew my brother out to Austin. We sat in my kitchen, the real one, the one with the backyard garden, and I slid an envelope across the counter. Inside was a check for $22,000 made out to him. He stared at it. "Marin, no, I can't take this." "It's not a gift," I said. "It's a closing. He used Mom's name to steal it from me. I'm giving it back through you, the one person in that family who never asked me for a thing. Do something good with it. Then we never talk about that money again." He didn't argue after that. He folded the check, and then he came around the counter and hugged me. Not the careful, distant hug of two kids who'd grown up on opposite sides of a rigged scoreboard, but a real one. And he said into my shoulder, "I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. I should have." "You see it now," I said. "That's enough." There's no card from my parents on my fridge. No call. No text. After 6 years of silence they used to wield like a weapon, the silence is finally just silence, and it doesn't scare me anymore. It sounds honestly like peace. My brother comes to Austin every couple of months now. We cook. We talk about the things nobody in that house ever let us say out loud. He's the only family I've got left, and it turns out one person who actually sees you is worth more than a whole table of people who don't. I think about that night at the Olive Garden sometimes, my father raising his glass to a degree my brother hadn't started, on a night that was supposed to be mine, telling a room of laughing relatives that I'd finished my little cooking program. He told me, without meaning to go find something I was good at. It took me 6 years and it cost me $22,000, and most of what I thought a family was, but I found it. I'm good at building things out of nothing. I'm good at turning a wound into something people line up to buy. And I'm good, it turns out, at knowing exactly what I'm worth, even in a room full of people who spent 25 years telling me I was worth nothing at all. They wanted me to disappear. I did, just not the way they planned. I built a whole life in the space where they refused to look, and the best part, the part I'd never trade for any apology they could offer now, is that I built it free. The cruelest thing my father ever did wasn't calling my degree a little cooking program in front of a laughing room. It was teaching me, without ever meaning to, that my worth was a number other people got to assign. For 25 years, I believed him. I wired $22,000 to a man who'd never once shown up for me because some starved part of me still thought that if I gave enough, I'd finally be seen. That's the thing about being raised as the overlooked child. You don't learn that you're unlovable. You learn that love is a thing you have to buy, over and over, at a price that keeps going up. What I understand now, sitting in a kitchen I built with my own 2 hands, is that every painful turn in this story followed a cause I could trace. My father chose his pride over my graduation, so I learned to stop expecting him to choose me. He bet money he didn't have, so eventually he came hunting for mine. He lied about a dying woman, so the family he'd held together with lies came apart the moment one true document hit the table. None of it was fate. It was just consequences, lining up like dominoes someone else had stacked years before. If I could reach back and tell that girl walking 2 miles to the gas station anything, it would be 3 things. First, that doing right by people doesn't mean letting them strip you for parts. I gave my brother back that $22,000 not out of obligation, but because I got to decide what kind of person I'd be, and I chose to be someone who closes a door cleanly instead of one who burns the house down. Choosing fairness when you have every reason for revenge is the only kind of strength that doesn't rot you from the inside. Second, that being underestimated is a quiet advantage if you're patient enough to use it. I didn't beat my father by screaming. I beat him by keeping receipts, by reading the contracts, by understanding the difference between knowing a thing and being able to prove it. Nobody hands the disregarded child anything, so we learn to think 2 moves ahead. That sharpness, that habit of watching and counting and never assuming you'll be rescued, turned out to be worth more than any framed report card on a hallway wall. And third, that the will to keep going when no one is clapping is the muscle that builds an entire life. I baked granola alone at 2 in the morning for nobody's approval but my own, and that stubbornness is what carried me from a coffee tan to a company. Nobody saw it happen. That was the point. My father told me to go find something I was good at. I found it. I'm good at building things out of nothing, at turning a wound into work, and at knowing exactly what I'm worth in a room full of people who spent a lifetime insisting it was nothing. They wanted me to disappear. I did. I just did it free.